This is episode 2 for the Tea Shop Chat, and today I have Kayden on, and Kayden, I've known Kayden for a long time. We grew up in the same area in Madras, in Perambur. But yes, Kayden, why don't you tell us who you are? Give us a little about us section for Kayden, who you are, where you grew up, just a short version because we'll definitely dive into all the details. But yeah, who are you, Kayden?
Me, I'm a human being. Kidding, no. Um, so we've known each other since we were kids, and I've been born and brought up in Chennai. Lived in Perambur, in and around Perambur. Then we moved to Kilpauk, then another suburb, and then I moved out of Chennai to Bangalore on work. From Bangalore, it took me to Melbourne with my wife, who is Australian, and then we're now back in Mumbai at the start of this year for the next
Nice. You
two.
summed up 25 years in like 25 seconds. No, a little bit more than 25 years.
Yeah, it's been one hell of a ride. All that happened was we saw a picture of me on Facebook. A mutual friend had posted a picture of another mutual friend and me in the pic, and she started the conversation, and one thing led to another. We met, and the rest of my life is a blur. So here I am, married, and back in Mumbai after going to Australia and signing my name off to the banks and on a mortgage for our house there, and back in Mumbai trying to learn Hindi and Marathi, which I have no clue which is what. The writing looks kind of same. Yeah,
So what's your last name?
it's Dias, and
How do you spell it? D
we
I
say
O.
Dias, Dias, and um, in Australia I've been referred to as Diaz, and I said Diaz is with a Z, and I was like, um, I'm not related to Cameron Diaz, or I could be the Diaz, and so it's kind of interesting, but
So tell me about, I want to really start, I want to layer it like I really want, like the whole point of this podcast, right, is to speak to other Anglo Indians, and get to know their story, right? The life story. So I would love to know, take it in layers. I would love to know a little bit about the history of your mom and dad, like your grandparents. How far back do you know your history, or if you can sum it up, like where do they come from? How do they meet? Where did they grow up? Like if you can summarize your family history, like in like a short amount of time, that would be so. I'd love to hear.
I think I can only go back as far as uh, my dad's mom's side great grandparents. Uh, so as far as they that can take me. Mom's maiden name is Vaz, V-A-Z. Her hometown is Erode, a small town in not so small anymore in Tamil Nadu. Um, and her parents, I can only go back as far as her mom and dad, because mom lost her parents when by the age of 14, she was, she had no parents. My grandfather was the first one who died when she was aged 13, and then my grandmother passed away the following year. So mom was adopted by my grandmother, that's my dad's mom's older sister. She became like a she was the middle child. So basically there were three kids. Mom has an older sister, she's the second, and then a younger brother. And so the older sister was doing her nursing in CMC Velo. uh, Her youngest brother was in St. Bede's in Chennai in boarding school. So, and mum was between E Road and doing her training in Church Park, uh, her teacher's training in Church Park, where she was in boarding.
I'm so I'm so like, where is E Road? Is E Road
So
still like in, like, how
E-Road
far is it from
is
Perambur? Is
an
it like,
overnight journey. It's the next stop after Salem.
okay?
So E-Road's between Salem and Coimbatore.
Oh, okay.
It's another um, important junction, as you would call it, on the railway circuit or the railway line. And I think it takes about 9 hours from what I remember. Or I know it's an overnight journey, but if you went by the super fast, I think it could take you about 6 or 7 hours or something like that. So yeah, so basically, when my grandmother was lying in railway hospital, and then the next bed happened to be my dad's aunt, uh, his uh, his mom's sister, older sister, who already had like so many kids of hers, and so they just happened to be next to each other in bed, and she knew my grandmother was worried, and she said, "What's going on?" She says, "You know, I'm on my last. I'm just wondering who's going to look after my kids." And she said, "Don't worry, we'll have an eye on them." So basically, she took mom in under her fold, and she didn't have to worry about my mom's older sister because she was, sorting out her nursing and training and stuff like that. And then her younger brother was in St. Bede's. So that's how mom and my dad actually met, because dad's hometown is Kolar Goldfields. My grandfather worked in the mines, and the only thing I remember of the mines is that one of the last houses my grandfather lived in was bang opposite the entrance of the one of the entrances of the gold mines. So I
No way,
do
really?
remember sometimes you would hear a boom. So I'm guessing, somewhere dynamite being set off to dig out the gold. Yeah. So, no, I do remember there was horse-drawn carts or carriages, as you would call it, in KGF. But by the time there were cars and bikes and motorbikes and scooters and stuff. But I do remember as a little child, the early years when we visited, now and then we would hop in, going from one cousin of dad's place, one of his cousin's houses, to the other cousin's house by these horse carts, but which more then was slowly becoming a novelty, I think. And now I think if you find it, it would be a novelty, because I haven't seen a horse-drawn cart or carriage in decades. Yeah, so I think you only see them in Chennai for
Yeah, for
weddings,
sure,
for all
for
these
sure.
Indian or Muslim weddings or something. You see them near Ripon Building. There's a little stable there, which is
Yeah.
still around there from when we were going to school. Yeah. So, yeah, so that's how they met. Dad happened to be in Chennai, in
Hmm.
Perambur, and mom happened to be in Perambur. So that's how they met. While dad courted mom, while mom was in Church Park School doing her teacher's training. She was a boarder there. And whatever stories I've heard of their courtship is from mom, because dad and I are born on the same day. We are born on the same day, but we are 30 years apart, October 11th, same
No
day,
way,
but
really?
we are poles apart. Like, dad's very introverted, and I think I'm the opposite side. I
Yeah.
certainly am not.
And you're definitely not introverted at
So,
all.
I must get mom's genes somewhere. So, yeah, so that's been the interesting part where, whatever I learned about how they dated and things like that, and started life together. Our first house was in Chetpat, um, which is near Ega Theatre, and one stop by train before Egmore Station. Um, but yeah, it's near the Chetpat Lake, and I do remember the area. And then, of course, from mom went to school. I mean, she taught first, I think, I can't remember the name of the school near in Chetpur, one of the presentation convents, and then from there she joined, not Good Shepherd.
Was it? It wasn't Good Shepherd?
I can't get the
Was it
name.
Good
It's
Shepherd?
Good Shepherd is the other one in Nungambakkam, but this one's in Shepherd. But the name eludes me. But and then she ended up in St. Joseph's convent in Perambur, which was for decades. I think about 37 years or something. Yeah. So mom was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. So I said I never wanted to be married to a teacher.
Wait, what's your mom's name?
Mom's name is Odelia Dias, and very well known around. Yeah, she's like the rock star in Perambur, and my wife found it very strange because when we took mom and dad uh, to Melbourne for a holiday, we brought them in so that dad and I could celebrate our 40th and 70th birthday in Australia, and literally every day mom would go out, or every second day there was like people making bookings to either they were coming home to see her or they were coming to pick her up and take her out, and so my
Of
wife said,
course.
what the hell's going on? And I said, yeah, everybody these are all her past pupils. So um, yeah, and I think when she retired, sitting at that function, I realized what a big rock star she was. And there's huge
Yeah,
shoes that
absolutely. Yeah.
37 years in a job is a long
Which
time.
which 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 class did she teach when she was in St.
I
Joseph's?
think the middle years, somewhere between sixth and eighth, depending on. Uh,
So you were never in her
no,
class. I was trying to figure out. I don't remember her. I know your mom. I know your mom, and I know her name. But I was trying to. Dang, was she ever a teacher?
no,
I
she
guess not.
was basically because we studied in St. Joseph's, and the boys, it was co-ed up till grade four. So and then we had to leave and go to other schools, whereas the girls continued till in those days till grade 10, and now it's till grade 12. Um, but I do not remember if they have co-ed now still. I haven't kept tabs on that school, funnily enough, even though mom's still associated with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think your mom has definitely like. I don't think anybody does not know of your mom, especially the girls, right? Like my sisters, everybody knows somebody who either they have a sister or somebody who's gone through and they've interacted with your mom, right? Because in St. Joseph's, right? I love it. It's such a small community. Everybody
Yeah.
knows everybody.
I
I
mean,
love it.
being like, Perambur being like the Anglo-Indian bastion, one of the areas for
Yeah,
Anglo-Indians, I mean, besides St. Thomas Mount and Roypuram or Georgetown, as people called it back in the day. Um, I mean, the outer extension, I think, of Perambur would be Perambur High Road, like
yeah,
Jamalia or
yeah.
Madhavaram and what's that,
Jamalia.
Kolathur and Agaram and Periyar Nagar. So,
Yeah,
yeah, this is
yeah,
this is like, wow, that's bringing back memories. So this is like basically, I mean, being the Anglo-Indian community, everybody kind of knew everybody. You sneezed and everyone knew that you sneezed. I think that's how everyone knew it. Um, as in comparison to living life in Australia, where on the street you live in, you wouldn't know your neighbor if you didn't make that extra attempt to try and
yep,
get to, make friends with them,
yep.
because life there, I think from an outsider's point of view, from me, I see the difference because you have no time. Um, you've got to do everything
Yeah,
yourself.
for sure.
So it's a very
Yeah.
interesting outtake on life.
So for sure, for sure. So you grew up in Perambur, but you grew up at least back then. Like Perambur was like you said, it was a bastion for Anglos, and it was like a concentration of Anglos in Perambur, and there were Anglos spread out all over. So obviously, you and I went to the same school, St. Joseph. So who did you go to? Who were your classmates? Do you even remember like anybody? Like, do you have like friends from like first standard still now?
I do keep in touch with a few of them. It- the thing is that I've got so many friends, and yeah, it's kind of hard. Like, in fact, there was another boy who I still keep in touch with. He and I both share the same birthday, Joe Godwin. I remember Clement Rollins. Uh,
Clement Rollins, yeah, I
I
know him. Yeah,
Over the last few years,
yep.
I've kind of lost touch with them, but yeah, then there was Nicholas D'Souza. I can't remember where Nicholas is.
No, wait, Nikki was in your it was in
Yeah,
your
Nikki
grade,
and I
really?
were classmates. Nikki was the quiet one until and then
I did
when,
not know that. I know he's younger than me.
and it's kind of funny
Yeah,
when he started. I think didn't he play briefly with you for some time in your band?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. He drummed with myself and Eddie.
so
Yeah, yeah,
when Nikki came on as drummer for you guys, and and you're doing like all metal stuff, and I'm like Nikki and metal drummer just didn't it didn't sit with me like he's the quiet one types. So but yeah, interesting. So um there was a boy called Timothy Bello or Rebello. I can't remember where he is. um but uh, at the top of my head, these are the few names I remember, but there were
yeah.
boys, juniors
Do
and
you
seniors.
remember? Do you remember? Your, yeah. Do you remember your teachers in St.
A
Joseph's?
lot of the teachers, and also because being associated even after I left school, uh, and
Yep,
mom being there for years, so literally most of the
yep.
teachers were like we were like uh, not I was not only the three kids, like me being the eldest, my brother, sister, and me were not only mom's children, but even the kids of the teachers there, because they kind of all the teachers kind of looked after everyone else's kids as well. So it was a communal thing. Like Mrs. Rose, Margie Rose, her son Rohan thing. So like Rohan, Kayden, Derwin, Daniela, all kids, and then there were Candida, Pereira, and all these children were like it was always a thing like how are your kids doing, and the teachers always looked out for.
Did you ever have Miss Kearney and Miss
Um,
Florentine?
Mrs. Connie, actually, my brother went to her, um, but I no, I was not directly in her class. I had Miss Pam Rodrigues. That's Christopher Rodrigues' mom. Um, then I had Mrs. Bout was I think she was the first one who gave me my launch pad into the or my foray into music.
Yeah, Miss. I had Miss Kearney. I remember two teachers, Miss Kearney and Miss Florentine. I know Miss Florentine passed away a couple of years ago, but till then, whenever I visited, I would go
Okay.
see her, and she would remember me. There would be like thousands of students, right? She was one of my favorites. So shout out to Miss Kearney, Miss Florentine, from St. Joseph's. Like earliest teachers in our lives.
Pam De Cruz, Pam Rodrigues, Margie Rose, Mrs. Kearney, Mrs. Bout, um, all these people, were strong foundations and stuff. And I mean,
So you and I kind of followed the similar path. We, at least from St. Joseph's, you moved on to St. Mary's.
most of us boys, I think, from Perambur went from St. Joseph's into St. Mary's. A few kind of branched directly to St. Matthias and Dufton and St. Bede's and St. Joseph's Wepery. But I think others mainly, most of them went from Perambur to Paris, and then again from grade 10 I think some people diverged into things like Dufton and Matthias. So I think these schools kind of uh, cater to the Perambur boys basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the bus stop, right? Right. You live right by the terminus, and we all lived not too far. You know, I still remember going to Denver Rozier's house every morning, picking him up. I think his uncle Floyd used to take us on his TVS 50, drop us off at the bus stop. and we'll take the bus 7A or
Yeah.
7C or 7B. Was there a 7B? I
7B
don't know.
was from,
I'm
I think that started from Koratur, but it was
Oh, really? Okay,
7 and
7A or
7A
7C.
was from Perambur, and
Dang, I love those old
7C was
buses.
from Ananaga, and then you
Yes,
had
yes, you're right. Yeah.
42B from Kolatur, uh, and then
Yep.
what was that 42JJ, which was that new non-stop bus limited stop or something
Yeah,
yellow
yeah,
board
yeah.
thing that was started from somewhere between Kolatur and Periyanagar. And then you had Periyanagar, you had 42A, I think, right? And then they would all diverge at some point, and then these bus races. I'm still trying to figure out after
Yes.
all these years.
Everybody wanted to be a bus
Everyone wanted
driver.
to be a bus driver, everyone wanted to be a bus conductor, trying to influence the bus drivers and the bus
Yep.
conductors to skip stops because you want to
Yep.
beat
To
the
race.
other bus
Yeah.
to to Paris. And if you overtook the bus, all the boys' heads and hands were out of the window, pumping. What? I'm still trying to figure out who came up with that phrase pumping and what did pumping mean? I mean, do
Yeah.
you
No
have
idea.
any clue as to what did pumping mean? I know that we did this every time one bus overtook the other, and the chorus was so loud that some people, I mean, the office goers used to get annoyed about that happening, but that was the thrill of it in those days. And then getting off at yeah,
Love it, man.
that
That's
was like the formula buses, I think, you know, early
yeah. Formula
yeah,
buses.
or formula Palawan transport.
Hilarious.
That's what formula PTC, jeez. But yeah, that was good memories. I mean, the path of our childhood, leaving from Perambur, and then going to other places. And I always thought the schools, I mean, we used to go by buses initially, and then there were a few who also started using the train services, the suburban trains, and or jump the express trains that are interstate that are coming into Permo. If they slowed down or stopped, gotten and went to school. So interesting times.
Would you ever let your 10-year-old son travel in a bus like 7A, 7B, all the way like for like 1 hour away to school by himself?
Um, Interesting because we only moved um, at the start of this year to Mumbai in January.
Yeah.
So back in Melbourne, I live in a suburb called Monbulk, and our house is 500 meters walking distance from the school. And up until last year, my kids were age 6 and 9. So uh, my daughter did ask, can I start going walking to school on my own? And we said no.
Ooh.
And we still say no. And I mean, here in Mumbai, it's a whole new cup of tea. And so I do not know. I mean, the dynamics are, we are dependent on public transport like, autos and Ubers and things like that. So it's not the same. And, I don't know if there's any buses which will take us from here to there. But if we were back in Chennai, would I let them go maybe at the age of when they reach grade. Oh, actually, hang on. My daughter's in grade 5. I don't know. Good question, but I do not know with things changed. Would you let your girl child go or would you let your boy go? But to think that we actually did this stuff, and then also the fact that
Yeah, I know, right?
we hung on the footboard of the buses, the last step
Yep.
with our bags loaded with our
Yeah.
books and textbooks and notebooks, our lunch boxes in our bags, and then the water bottle strapped on. And then if you were doing sports, like, I played hockey, so you got the hockey stick as well, and you're hanging on for dear life as a bus is slanting at this angle. And then you move to places like Australia, and then in Melbourne, the bus doors and the train doors are shut like this. You got to press the button for the door to open. And I keep telling my kids, I said, your father used to hang out of the bus and thing, and they don't believe it. So I think now that they're getting a little older, and maybe on my next visit back home to Chennai, take them on a bus ride, like, a little nostalgia trip towards uh, school, get on the 77A. Of course, there won't be our drivers that we knew, Kanaya and Solomon and all, Chandamama and
Dude, we
stuff,
knew them by name.
you
Yes.
know.
Yeah, Chandamama.
We knew these
Yes.
guys by name, and because I stayed in close proximity to the terminus, they used to come and visit me at home. So during the summer holidays and stuff like that, they used to come home for a cup of coffee or something like that. That's how close we had that. So when I introduced them to dad,
Oh, nice.
so
I'm sure they got a nice Christmas package as
yeah,
well, you know?
Christmas package, and also because dad was on the same route to work, so if they saw him once, they knew that, oh, this is Kayden's dad. When dad used to, if he's a little late, or the bus is already leaving, but if they see him, they'll stop and get him, and he gets in. And in fact, they'll go to the point where they'll ask somebody to make space and let him sit on opposite them. In that side
Yeah.
seat.
Dude, not to jump ahead. I really want to layer this in, but that's something. If we can just jump ahead, because you migrated to Australia, different culture from India. One thing I always point out to my kids, and I notice this, right? When I go to an Indian restaurant over here, and there's a little wait, the owner will come up, like when my kids were little, he'll say, "Oh, is this your daughter?" And he'll say, "Get her an ice cream or something," because they're so like the American restaurants won't do that because they're just not like hospitable, right? But the Indian restaurants still bring that culture, like it's a child. Hey, here's a free ice cream while you wait. Did you notice that in Australia as well?
Um,
Or
Actually, I mean, now that you bring it up, I mean, there have been times when the kids have been entertained by the hostess or thing,
yeah,
but like they give them a lolly or thing, maybe because I do not know, maybe like my son, he's quite the charmer. I always thought I'd have to be worried about the
he is.
daughter, but it seems the other way around with the little fellow, because um, I shudder to think in 20 years what's going to happen. So, but yeah, I mean, if you go to a busy restaurant in Melbourne, let's say a non-Indian restaurant, they'd be like, they take your name down and stuff, and you just got to wait your turn. Uh, if there's a foyer, you're waiting there, or if not, you're waiting outside. But there's not too much of engagement, and if the kids are a bit thing. But there have been instances, depending on where you live, because like where I lived, it's more smaller communities like Monbulk and Belgrave. So everybody kind of knows everybody I mean, the town of Monbulk has like 3,600 people. That's all is the population. Whereas the apartment complex that I live here in Mumbai has over 9,000 people. And when I tell people back home, they're like, "What?"
Dang.
And I'm like, "Yep." So, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, but I still find that, back here, where if we are waiting at a restaurant, the kids sometimes get are engaged by the people, or they'll try and give, like in a South Indian restaurant, they'll be like, "Oh, offer a papad," or you want to get them a soda. Like I introduced the kids to the goli soda, the little marble in the bottle. So the kids love the fact, and yeah, the tradition carries on where they're still trying to get the bottle, get the marble out of the bottle.
Okay, maybe I'll need to Google this up, but it's like, what the heck is Goli soda? Is it just like it's
Actually,
sweetened
goli soda was
carbonated water? Is that
goli
what it
soda
is?
was a nickname given to those soda bottles because it had those marbles in it, and whoever came up with that concept was is quite, quite innovative. I think way ahead of their time.
For sure. So we've been through Kayden in school. You went to St. Mary's. I know you're a really good singer. Really killer vocalist. You've competed, you've won. So so yeah. So where do you get your musical giftings from? From your mom and dad? Were any of them
Mum
musical?
was musical. I purely get it from mum's side. Mum has done a lot of musicals. I've also seen mum um, act. Back in the day, when they had Children's Day. I think St. Joseph's School, St. Joseph's Convent in Perambur must be one of the only few presentation convents that I know of that where the teachers acted for and performed for the kids on Children's Day. So yeah, so basically, um, I get my musical genes from mum, and as a little kid growing up, mum's brother used to live with us, so he would take the guitar. Gerard's pretty famous. Gerard was. A lot of people know Gerard was as a musician. So he used to take the guitar. Suddenly he would sit down, and then we used to on and off. We used to have my dad's youngest brother also come and stay with us. So my dad's youngest brother, Kayden Dias, was a drummer, and then you got Gerard, who's the guitarist. So Errol would sit down on the metal folding chairs, and he start drumming on that, and Gerard would be like, "All right, come on, kid, sing." And apparently, um, I sang Neil Diamond's. I can't even remember the name of it, but I do remember mom said, and this is how it sounded: "Darling, I'm feeling very lonesome. Call you on the phone, son. Didn't have a dime," and so things like that. So I did grow up singing them, and influences due to these two uncles of mine. Uh, uh, I listened to bands like Asia thanks to mom's brother from a very small age. OC Bisa and bands like OC Bisa and stuff, Santana.
OC
Yeah.
Bisa,
And then
dang.
I remembered, and thanks to dad, I must have been 4 or 5 years old when I first heard the Black Album of AC/DC, Van Halen, then Led Zeppelin, In Through the Outdoor, that album. So I didn't know I was listening to rock. And I do remember converting one of my classmates, Canute D'Souza in St. Mary's School. He was a St. Thomas Mount boy. Um, so Canute was one of these big in those days cassette collection collectors where he had all, you name the artists he had, right from rock to hard rock. He had like right from Bon Jovi to a couple of hard rock artists, and or quite a bit of it, and you name it, he had it. And for some reason I kept telling him, "Oh, rock's devil's music, and you should listen to country." And by the time he left school by grade 9, I think I must have brainwashed him. And by the time I got into, I realized, it dawned on me that I was listening to rock music, like all these bands like Deep Purple and stuff that I grew up to, was actually rock. And I like, wow. So I've had this influence of music that dads listen to. Uh, that's one influence. Then mom's brother and my dad's brother, from the musical point of view. And then music, right from Mrs. Bout getting me into musicals in grade 1 to Mrs. Pam Rodriguez getting me in grade 3 teaching us singing and stuff. So by the time I joined St. Mary's School, I got into the choir. I was hell bent on getting into the choir. So that was nurtured by Mr. Sones. So all along, having these people influenced, and that helped a lot and them actually seeing and nurturing talent, you know, God, I've got to bless them for all they did, because I don't think we would have reached the levels we did uh, without these people, nurturing us through our lives. So yeah, that was my musical influences.
Who of the Fee grade brothers was in your
Actually,
class?
both were my juniors. Mario was my brother's
Oh,
classmate.
really?
Mario was, yeah, 2 years junior to me, and Mark was further, younger to Dervin and Mario.
Yeah.
So the young
Young
boys,
boy.
and but we all ended up playing in the school band. Um, with the I still remember the drum kit. If you ask Mark, it's a very interesting drum kit. And when we look at what our kids now have, like if my daughter's learning drumming in school, so and she's all this sophisticated. There's an acoustic kit, and plus they have these electronic drum pads and with the amp, and you can select what type of kit you want it to sound like and stuff. And but the one in St. Mary's school was, if you look at the drum kit, consisted of three or four drum kits put together as one, and that's that's the instruments we learnt on, and then went to uh, the practice rooms like Johnny DeMello's practice room in near Thousand Lights on Mount Road, and then came pro musicals with Sudhin started that practice room as well. So yeah, we had very um, hard times, I think, and we creative things for instruments, because I do remember if we practice as a band, we did it at home, and for one of the guitar amps, I even had like these old National Panasonic stereo system, which we somehow managed to plug the 2:1 cable and connect it to one of the guitars and use that as an amp. Um, and then we moved from my house because it was getting a little too out of hand, and my landlady was like, complaining. So then we moved to my bass guitarist's house, Alistair Terry, and everyone in Perambur knew when
Alistair
Alistair
Terry,
Terry's
yeah.
house is having a practice session, because he stayed on the main road.
Dude, he's such a good person. Alistair's such a good
Oh
person
yeah,
and such a good
I know.
bassist as well.
I think I'm very fortunate to have had the talented musicians that I got to
Yeah.
play with in the band that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. Alistair is he's another quiet guy, but so talented.
Yeah,
Like the guy is
and he
amazing.
would put his head down and learn. The thing was that um, the set list that we had and songs that we did sometimes were a bit complicated, and we'd be like, all right, you know what, we can't get it right, so let's scrap it. And Alistair, I still remember, like, Iron Maiden, from the Fear of the Dark album, uh, that bass run for the song, and he had to learn, and he actually went and learnt it. Fugitive. Fugitive, there was this bass run which was quite hard, and we decided to scrap it. And he stayed back while the rest of us, Leander and the boys, we went to watch, I think, some culturals or something like that, or some rock show. And Alistair stayed back, and by the time we finished the show and headed back, and he's like, um, put that song back on the list. And I said, why? And he's like, oh, I've learnt it. I said, but the bass line? He's like, no, no, I've got it. And then we sat down, and he had it note down to, note for note. I think Jitma was one of the biggest culturals down south for us Chennai boys, because you had bands coming from Bangalore, Kerala, and wherever else to compete. So it was not only, I think that was the only other ground, and but I think we, for some reason, we didn't venture into Bangalore territory. Every year we wanted to go, uh, like Christ College and stuff like that. Something or the other happened, but we didn't compete. But Yeah, Jipma was like the Woodstock for us, staying there those 3 days, register, and then the food they gave you, and then it's Pondicherry. Booze is cheap, and then you were still being a tight ass. You do things like buy a bottle of beer and buy a small little those small miniature bottles and dunk it into the beer to spike your drink and get high and get high fast. So yeah, interesting times that we had.
So, so then obviously you got a job. You moved to you had landed up in Bangalore. You were working
I
for an
started
airline, right?
with Jet Airways in Chennai. I think that was the first reformed version that people saw of me, because being in the airline, clean shaven, short hair, no earrings, and obviously you're in uniform, no skull t-shirts and rings, and all the snake rings and skull rings and all the stuff that we had. So yeah, started with Jet, and then I was borrowed by Kingfish Airline to start the airline from scratch. So that's how I moved to Bangalore. So yeah, I mean, from Bangalore I ended up in
Yeah.
Melbourne.
And is that where you met your is that where
Yes,
you met
that's where we
your
met,
wife?
and we she moved to Bangalore from Melbourne. She was there for 6 years. 4 years into her stay, that's when we met. Um, we had our paths crossed. Apparently, she had seen me before. Um, I think about a year and a half or 2 years before we actually had our first meeting.
So then so then you met your wife.
So Christian and I met in Bangalore through a photograph that was uploaded on Facebook by one of my mutual friends, because I used to host karaoke as well, besides doing freelance singing in Bangalore. Um, so one of the other karaoke jockeys had put up a picture of another mutual friend who was a chef. Um, he and I were in that pic from the previous week's karaoke night, and she happened to see that and commented on the picture. The opening line was, "Your friend is quite hot," on Facebook, and it's still there. Th- that photograph is still there, and then the whole conversation that uh, transpired between her and the mutual friend while I was in a meeting with my colleague and slash wingman, trying to close off a deal for one of the malls with Marks and Spencers, and we knew it was getting nowhere. So I'm like, mate, let's just close this meeting. These guys are not going to sign on the dotted line. They want more space in this mall, and we're trying to cap them off at so much of space. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. Meantime, I can see there's this chick, Kristen McMahon, commenting on a picture on on Facebook about some guy who's quite hot, and we're that I'm tagged in. Let's close this meeting, go back and see what this picture is all about, and uh, you know, if he's not hot, let's just troll. I'll tag you in, and let's just troll this picture. So that was the whole intention. And so we closed the meeting, went back to my desk, and I open, and all I see is just the mutual friend and me. And I said, they're like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Nah." I kept quiet while this conversation went on between her. And I thought it was a sick joke. Somebody was playing a prank. And my vice president turned on and he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Oh, there's this conversation." I said, "But I think she's referring to me." So they said, "Are you going to reply?" And I said, "No." And then my vice president actually got up, and he he took the he grabbed the keyboard from my workstation. And he said, "If you don't reply, I'm going to do it." And it just so happened that I said, "Okay, okay, fine." And then my lame entry was, "What's going on here?" And she's like, "Are you the hot guy from the picture?" And I'm like, "Guilty as charged." So it's kind of, people still don't believe when they ask, "So how did you two guys meet?" And I say, through a picture on Facebook. That's how it started. And Tristan actually is quite a resourceful woman. She made this video and surprised me. Yeah, so her being Kristen being the resourceful woman, made this PowerPoint video of pics from me, from a little kid all up onto the way into adult life, and the same with her thing. And then the starting point was the picture. She took a snapshot of that photograph and the conversation on Facebook, and put that in on the slide. And then, so that played. At the wedding, and I was like, what the hell? So everybody got to read the conversation, and thanks to Facebook and memories, that thing still shows up. So yeah.
I would take a picture of that, and anytime there's any argument, I would leave the picture somewhere where she would see it, and but that's just me, and probably annoy even
But the
more.
funny thing is that um, here's a very interesting thing. Like, if ever, life is never rosy in a marriage. You always have, you agree to disagree. That's what makes a good, healthy relationship. And so when we've had arguments and fights, I don't think that picture is enough to remind us, because the paperwork that I had to do to migrate to Australia is not even, it's insane. 486 pages.
So tell me about Kristen. What's her
So
family like? What's
Kristen's
her
name
roots?
before becoming a Dias was a McMahon, and obviously they have a lot of Irish roots. Both her dad's side is Irish roots. Um, he's a very interesting man because he he's the youngest of seven boys, and
Oof.
seven
Oh,
boys, and
seven
he's the
boys.
youngest of seven boys, and he's had six daughters and finally a son, and seven kids now. And my mother-in-law has a bit of Irish and Italian roots in her, so which I didn't know until just before Kristen and I got married, when I went to meet the future in-laws. And then Kristen said, "Oh, you got to cook up some your famous bolognese for mom." And I was telling her, and then halfway through cooking it, and my mother-in-law says, "Oh, I do have a little bit of Italian in me, Italian roots in me." And I'm like, "Oh shit, now I have to." And I'm like, "You're making Italian food for somebody who's got some Italian roots," so the pressure was even more. But the experience is kind of interesting because, like my mother-in-law's Italian side, they have the Brunei meet every year, the annual Christmas meet, which is always somewhere mid to last week of November, and all the families get together for Christmas. So
Oh,
it's always
nice.
in somebody's house, like an aunt or a grand aunt or a niece or nephew's house, and then I've been accepted into the family. So it's been fun to, like, oh, okay, so there is also the family spirit depending on cultures and things that you have, and things. It's not like, oh, when you move to the West, people don't believe in family and stuff. So it's about their approach on it. So Christmas has always been special. Um, every year that I've been there has been, except for the COVID years that we didn't have it, but every year was, uh, the Brunei Christmas, and of course we hosted it one year. So they not only had a bit of Aussie stuff that was made, I also made our Indian stuff, and they lapped up as much as possible. They loved the food,
Nice.
and this is the first year now that we are back in India. That this is the first year we're going to be missing the Brunei Christmas, and that will be a bit sad. I think it's the last weekend of November this year. So it's been a very interesting experience, for her culture learning. She's got, but I think her mom's been on a path where they can actually trace back their roots to Ireland and in Italy and stuff. So they've gone a couple of years back. Whereas with
Oh
my
wow.
side, on my dad's side, I know it's the Dias part. I can only trace it up as far as my grandfather. I do not know too much past my grandfather, but my grandmother's side, that's my dad's mom's side. I can take it back till my great grandmother, because my grandmother comes. There's a French and Portuguese. There's Passan is French, and then you've got the Portuguese thing. So we got a little bit more further up the tree there, the family tree. So which is good. And then my mum's side, of course, it stops with the vase, and there's not too much to go on, because
Yeah, yeah.
her having lost her parents at a young age. So it would be nice to actually learn a bit more about our history, and where we come from, and also how did this marriage happen for us to become an Anglo-Indian community. Who who mixed with who, which Indian mixed with which Portuguese, or which French, which Nana or which Papa was naughty, or decided to cross the border. And in fact, also it would be interesting to find out if we could actually trace it back. I mean, imagine if we could actually do that. What were the challenges for, let's say, some ancestor, French ancestor or Portuguese ancestor of mine who mixed with some Indian person, and when they got married, what were the challenges they had with getting married? Because I know the challenges
Yeah.
that my wife and I
Yeah.
had, that Kristen and I had, being it was like penance. The Indian government, we had to think, you should see the place that we got married in, the in Bangalore, in Alsur Lake. That little register office, it looks like a little cow shed, like a little two-room house kind of thing with a cow, with a shed. And the kids were like, "Is that where cows are?" I'm like, "No, no, that's where the mom and dad got married." It's kind of funny. That's where we got married, and I paid $500 and never got the change back. So I'm like, "What?" And the guy like, "Thank you," and he puts the money into his drawer. And I'm like, "Okay, so that money's never coming back." And then the church wedding was uh, quite stressful. Thank God, uh, Father Joseph Ryan, so I didn't want Joey to be baptized in India, because I said, if we went through all this paperwork to get married in India, where imagine the day before you get married, you get a call at 7 o'clock in the evening from the church office saying that, "Oh, you can't get married tomorrow." And I'm like, "Pardon?" "No, you can't get married because we don't have your paperwork." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me, because I've given it to the assistant parish priest 2 weeks ago. What are you talking?" He's like, "Well, I don't have anything." So I literally had to drop everything and hop onto my motorbike, then rush there stressed out, like I would have burst a couple of blood vessels, or I could have easily had an aneurysm, but that's how stressed I was. And then to realize that the guy did not even want to get off his chair. 2 doors away is the man he reports to, the assistant parish priest. All he's got to do is, they didn't even talk to each other. So he's got the paperwork salting at his desk, and this guy's got thing, and this guy decides to show his power. I'm in control of things, and say that, I don't think you can get married tomorrow. So imagine you having to call off the wedding, where you got half the family of your wife's side come down from another country, flown thousands of miles, and then your friends come from all over the globe, and then you say, "Oh, sorry, we can't have the wedding because two people couldn't do their job." So this was like penance that we had to go through. And I wonder what our ancestors went through to get married. So if there was a Portuguese or a Dutch or French or English or Scottish, what did he do when he got naughty or decided to he or she crossed the line? and mingled with an Indian, what social stigma did they go through? That would be an interesting subject.
So that's a great segue into you migrating to Australia. I know you visited Australia before that even, but when you officially went like for the to settle in, how was that experience? Like meeting the family, extended family, friends, and then if you saw anybody else from Perambur in Australia, what was that? What was your community like when you moved there?
Um, it's kind of interesting. There's two sides to every story, or like, two sides of the coin, because um, going on holidays, people make time for you. I still remember my first holiday. By the
Yeah.
time I could even get my visa sorted to go to Melbourne, my aunt had already sent me an email with an itinerary, for the full 30 days. This is what you're doing, this is what's going on, and
Yep.
this person's picking up and this person's dropping, you're going here, you're going there, you're doing all these things. And it was kind of worked out. And of course, there was further chop and change when you went on a holiday. But one of my cousins, Marcel, he always puts it point blank, no filters, just lays it out straight on the table the way it's meant to be. And he's like, cousin, when you come on a bloody holiday, everybody has time for you. But once you move here, now that you're going to be moving to Australia and you're married, once you move here, nobody bloody has time for you. You won't even have time to even scratch your backside. So I was like, what do you mean? But which is the truth, because um, like I stayed a half an hour's drive where we stay, the suburb where I lived. I'm a 30 minutes drive from not only one but quite a few of our childhood friends, common friends that we've had, like Leander, Donovan, Nigley, there's Garth, Farron, Vanderpet. Now, all these boys are
Oh
in the
wow.
vicinity, or if they're
Yeah.
not, and we're all on the eastern side of Melbourne, and then you've got uh, the other gang on the western side of Melbourne. So there's a lot more. So they're either on the east or the west, and then there's the odd one or two were spread out in other suburbs where. Um,
That's crazy because Don was literally your
yeah,
neighbor. You lived pretty close to him in Perambur, right? And what are the odds of you and him uh, living pretty close in
no,
Australia as well? That's kind of wild.
yeah. I mean, because Don and Leander were like, they were like what, 4 streets apart from my place, and then you had now, the two brothers stay like about 2 streets apart from each other, and they're exactly 30 minutes drive from my place. uh, if I hopped in the car and went down the mountainside or the hill, or like if you ask Don, where's Kayden, what time is he coming, if you were visiting, it'd be like, oh, Kayden, he'll be coming down the mountain when he comes, and he has a good laugh. Because I live in in a hill range, or the Dandenong ranges. Um, so it's all mountainous territory where I live. Um, and then Leander's my daughter's godfather. So yeah, so that's how close we
Oh,
have
nice.
been over the years, ever since grade one.
Yeah, yeah. That's so great. Man, I love that. Like having a relationship that for that long and still being close, especially when you travel and you leave the country and you're able to have that relationship, is
No,
such a
it's kind
good
of
thing.
interesting because uh, for my wife marrying into an Indian family, like, um, she gets
Yeah.
Indians a lot. She understands how Indians interact. Um, why she loves India and why we are back in India is because she's always been hell bent on coming back. And in fact, we still have these conversations about when we retire, where where we're going. I said, Vietnam, Thailand, and she's like, no, India. I said, I'm staying put in Melbourne, and she's like, nah, you can stay in Melbourne. I'm moving to India. So she's always liked India a lot, and to her, she likes the warmth, like how you mentioned, in a South Indian restaurant or an Indian restaurant, how kids are treated and greeted and stuff, and made are occupied. Whereas, um, I guess what she means, I mean, when she says you don't get this warmth that in India, like, if you were passing by, you could just drop in without even making an appointment. You'd be like, hey, I'm in the
Yeah,
neighborhood. And
yeah.
we'd be like, oh, come on over, have a meal. And it's still there. Even though things have changed in India, life is a bit more fast paced. I can see such a difference of how life has evolved in India. But, people still make time for you. You're like, you can still go in, even if you're just passing by and you say, no, I'm just going to be here for a quick flying visit, 20 minutes or something, just say hi. But you end up staying, having dinner and a couple of drinks sometimes, depending on whose house you go to. And then you're like, so much for a 30-minute, quick visit. And that's how it is. Whereas there in Australia, you don't have that because life is pretty clockwork and hectic, because you not only have a things to do list for your day-to-day life, get up, get things organized for work, go to work, come back, get things organized to go to work the next day, get dinner organized and stuff. And then you've got a list where if you've got your own home, then you've got to become your own plumber, carpenter, gardener, electrical, you know you become everything. And YouTube and Google became my two best friends, to a point where I now know how to change a light globe, as they call it, not bulb in Australia. Yeah.
Light globe.
So in Australia, that's what they call it. And I know how to change that after in a microwave oven, from learning that online, and learning how to service the ducted heater, things like the autopilot light, and so things that you never had to deal with in India. and and here on the other hand, I live in an apartment. I have a terrace garden, and so I've got a gardener for that who comes once a week, does trimming and watering of plants, and sprucing the place up. And then you got a maid, you if I had a car someday, then you can always, if you can afford it, you can get a driver or things like that. So are cheap here. Like, you could get a person coming and doing a massage, a body massage, in your own home. You don't even have to go to the massage parlors anymore. Whereas, you know the standard of living is quite expensive.
For me, I would like to live. The location is not as important. I think I would like to live with family closer together. It's like almost 20 hours away to go to India and come back over here another 20 hours. I wish. I always thought maybe Europe is a good place to live in the middle. It's 10 hours either way. But anyway, so so how is it when you before this trip, when you were living in Australia for a long time and then you visited India, like what's your first what's when you see when you is it like, do you go through culture shock? And what are your thoughts when you visit India after a long time?
Life in Australia, first of all, you think, being an Anglo-Indian, you're exposed to the Western culture and you've got a good enough exposure to it. But it's a whole new ball game when you move to the West, or to a country like the United Kingdom or Australia or America or Canada, wherever you go, because um, holidays, like I said, holidays is one thing, but living there is another thing altogether. And then learning mannerisms, uh, like for example, even though my wife's Australian, she's got the head shake, ha, ayo, chuma. So my kids, by the time they we actually moved to India, already knew this. So when they came on holidays, uh, my kids had learned Wanakam, and of course, Joey thought uh, my mom's maid's name was Wanakam, so he would ask Nana on FaceTime, Nana, where's Wanakam? So I'll be like, no, no, the maid's name is not Wanakam. Her name's Sulochana, but like for us, new terminologies like me going to the hardware store called Bunnings, and I'm telling this guy, there was an instance, I'm telling this guy, I'm like, excuse me, could I have that 60-watt Philips bulb from the third shelf? And he says, oh, we don't have that, mate. And I'm like, no, it's there. And he's like, oh, no, we don't have it. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? And I'm like, it's there on the third shelf. Philips watt, I can see it. It's Philips 60-watt bulb. And he turns around finally on my insistence and looks at it and he goes, oh, you mean the globe? And I'm like, globe? The last time I heard, it had the world map on it, and that's what we learned in geography in school. What the hell is he talking about? And I said, no wonder God put Australia on the corner, of the planet and said, you be there, down under, the corner of the globe. So you have to learn things like that. Then they say, how you going for how you doing, which had a very crazy incident again, which I was made to feel like a fool, and I didn't want to go back to the supermarket again on that. It's all these little things that make a difference. Dinner is called tea, so I learned that from
No way, really?
my in-laws when they said
What time is dinner or tea?
not conducive timing for me because I'm still Indian. Because for me, dinner was always the earliest would be 9 o'clock or 8:30, 9 o'clock, which was still early by my standards. But there they eat dinner by 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the evening, or even for them 7 o'clock is late. So when they say come and have tea, and I'm like, no, I don't want to have tea. I'm fine. I don't feel like having tea. And they're like, no, you got to eat tea. And I'm like, how do you eat tea? You only drink tea. And then I figured out that I was given a lesson on tea means dinner. And I'm like, why don't you just say dinner? So there's all these names you learn and mannerisms which are different. Um, Culture wise, it's very different. And then you come back to India.
So you have two kids, right? I know Joey. What's your daughter's
Scarlett,
name?
and
Scarlett, right? Am I
yeah,
right? Okay.
Scarlett and Joseph. So Scarlett's the older girl. She's now 10, and Joey turned 7 in July. So life for them is a whole new experience in India. I mean, Scarlett's been visiting India since her first time to India was when she was a year old, and then she's had two other visits um, in between. Joey um, has had two visits before we finally moved now. So life for them has been a completely different ball game, where um, you have open spaces, clean air, and where development in Australia is this way, whereas development in India is this way. You go up, the only way is up, not sideways. And
How is it um, culturally? How do you raise your kids? Are they aware? They are multicultural kids, or how is it? What's the home life for the kids? Are you intentional about it? Do they ask questions, or they're just being
they
kids
just
for
been
now?
kids, but I think more than me, it's been Kristen who's the driving force behind it, um, creating that multicultural awareness, making them understand that they have Indian roots. Because I know Scarlett, year before last, in school, she came home one evening from school, and she told us about this argument that she had with one of her classmates. So I said, what was the argument about? So she said, oh, we were talking about where we were born. And so Scarlett was asked, where were you born? So she said, I was born in Melbourne. So the classmate said, oh, so you're Australian. And so Scarlett said, no, I'm Indian. So Scarlett, classmate said, no, if you're born in Australia, you're Australian. She says, no, I'm Indian because my father's Indian. So I think that's somewhere because, of being, coached by Christian about their Indian roots. They've always had that thing. And this was never a discussion before we even got married, where Kristen said that um, she wanted the kids at some age to come back to India and live when they're of an age of understanding and live here for a couple of years, um, to so that they know where their father comes from, get to understand Indian roots and culture, because it's very important to know, because that naivety of what India is all about, like, somebody who's never been outside their own continent or country, like, an Australian, some people, you would get questions like, oh, is India like a jungle? There's lots of monkeys and snakes around. And I'm like, no, we have, I mean, there are jungles, and then there's, urban areas. And then,
Yeah.
just like you, we have high rise buildings. We
Yeah.
live in apartments, and we wear the same clothes like you do, and same brands. And, we have all your same Roxy and Quicksilver and all these brands in India. So it's not like, so, you know, exposure is very important. And so that was something that Kristen wanted them to do. But also, she has a secret love for India. So this was like her perfect opportunity to come back home. And here we are. So the kids are getting a proper dose of it. So it's kind of interesting that the kids, especially Joey's kind of sapping and, being a sponge at his age, he's kind of soaking up Hindi and Marathi. So when he comes home and sings something, I'm like, is that Hindi or is that Marathi? And he'd be like, I don't know, I forget. I mean, like, what class did you have? So, like, is it Hindi? I'd be like, Dad. I'm like, son, I have no clue. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting that you and I kind of know just a few basic words or whatever we've learned from Hindi movies, or unless we studied it as a second language. But my kids are now being,
I studied Hindi as a second language, but I don't know. I didn't pay attention. I can
oh,
understand
you,
more
so
than I
you
can
you did
speak.
Hindi. We chose, I did Tamil till 10th, and then switched to French. Of course, which, now I can't even remember any French. Like, French is a language, if you don't practice it, you forget it. And
Even if I remembered French, right, the conversation I can have, like, "Hey, the cat is under the table."
I my
Okay,
thing is only
like
just a few things
nonsensical.
like, parlez-vous français, what's your name, and that's about it, and then it ends there.
So, so what's the? We'll wrap this up soon. What's the biggest challenge in this whole um, in this whole like multicultural family? If there's no challenges, it's fine. But or what's the big? If there's no challenge, like what's the biggest thing that you notice, or like something that's interesting, or before you do that, even like when your kids speak, what kind of accent do they speak in? Do they speak like they have a like? If you close your eyes, would you think that's just another Aussie kid speaking, or is it like a
All
mix?
right, let's not even go near the accent part, because I mean they're proper Aussie accent. And I guess, like, you and I speak English right now, but there must be some kind of tinge of Indianness in our accent. So, which you and I don't see, or because, we just sound normal. This is how we sound. Uh, but my kids, uh, I can't understand my kids very often sometimes, because so well, because when they go into a lot of things, and then and Kristen kind of, takes my case for it, and she goes like, "They're your children, and if you don't understand them, who the hell is going to understand?" I said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "They sound,
Yep,
really Aussie sometimes, and I have to ask them to repeat
yep.
themselves." Um, and they kind of take my case sometimes when they do an imitation of thing, and I hate it when Scarlett or Joey does that. And I feel like Scarlett does it. Dad says, close the bloody door. Sound that way? I'm like, really? You know, it's so. And then this is like before we moved here last year. One day, Joey comes up to me and, Dad. And I'm like, yeah. And he's laughing and he's like, Dad. And I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm Indian. I said, what do you mean you're Indian? He's like, I'm doing the Indian head shake. I said, oh, is that what you were trying to do? I said, I thought you were having a moment of fits or something. And he's like, what's that? Culturally, there are things that we are learning, and right from, um, you know, things that are very Australian and things that are very Indian, and they're still not used to it or exposed to it. So from in terms now, they've this year is a whole new um ball game for them, where they've learnt things like, Dad, what's that funny thing with, like, the man with a elephant's head and trunk? And so I had to explain to them that his name is Ganesha, and because Mumbai is very different compared to Chennai and Bangalore, so it's a whole new uh, cultural observation for me itself. Even though I'm Indian and
Sure.
I've lived most of
Yeah.
my life in India. So, like, if you move back to Mumbai, um, it would be a whole new world for you altogether. So culturally, there's so much to learn for me alone, and then for the kids. So they're being exposed to it, and now they've seen fireworks every now and then go off during these festivals. And us living in an apartment complex where we're on the 17th floor out of the 43. At the 17th floor, you can actually see fireworks in the sky, and they are like, wow. So it's a whole new experience for them seeing all this, because you don't get this there in Australia. So it's only unless it's New Year's Eve or something like that, which you see on TV, or unless you go to Melbourne City to
Yeah.
bring in New Year. But so they're
Yeah.
learning food. um, School is different for them. Like, funnily enough, they go to an international school here. So the facilities that they have in the school,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't even dream of in
Yeah.
Australia. I had to fit Joey with his cricket gear. Now, you and I have played cricket all our lives, all right? So Joey has started going for cricket classes, I mean, for cricket coaching. And so we had to pick up cricket gear for him: pads, um, gloves, the helmet with the visor, whatever, the mouth guard or whatever it's called. I mean, that's my crap knowledge of cricket. That's how well I know cricket. And and he had all these. So he had a elbow pad, which I've never seen. Of course, he had the abdomen guard, or as we called it, ball guard, and Joey calls it a penis guard. I said, mate, you're going to redefine cricket, I think. So they've asked him to buy an English willow bat and stuff like that. And I was like, so Christian was like, oh, the bat I picked up was, uh, they said, for tennis ball. Do they play cricket with tennis ball? And I said, yeah, that's what we used to play with back in school. I said, we played hand cricket, hand cricket and hand tennis. That's what we did. And yeah, of course, at home we played cricket bat, but we still played with a rubber ball or tennis ball, and rarely used a cricket ball. So this is proper training, proper professional cricket coaching and stuff like that. So times have changed where you and I, the things that we had growing up as kids, uh, has changed so much, and now what our kids are going through, um, right from music lessons to other extracurricular activities like sports, things like this, It's unbelievable.
Hey, so Kayden, I'm gonna wrap it up, but it's been really great speaking with
Likewise,
you,
I
man. It's
know.
been a while. It's been too long, but I've always find it fascinating. Like if you were to track like the Dias name, right? It's just traveled from like E Road and all that place, hopped over to like Melbourne, and now like back to Bombay. And if you like, it's crazy. Like your grandparents probably did not even think of these things, but
I
we can track that the way it's a crazy story.
never in my
You know,
wildest dreams
I love it.
did I think that I'd end up moving to Australia, um, and then
Yeah,
coming back again to India. Um, that um, I still do not know where the road ahead takes us, because we still have a home
yeah,
back there in Melbourne, and
yeah.
we've got family.
Dude, Airbnb, are you
Right
Airbnb?
now,
Is
it's
that
on
on Airbnb
Airbnb,
or?
and then we're just going to go into long-term rental
Okay,
because it's been a bit too hard to
okay.
handle and manage from here. And you've got two mobile numbers, and you're trying to keep costs down as much as possible. It's kind of hard, and then you're trying to meander through the workings of the Indian system and the Australian system. Uh,
Yeah,
Things have changed here in India with the present government, where they've opened up things here, but they've also made it difficult. So you can get money into India easily. So you can snap your finger, use Western Union or MoneyWise, and bang, it's there in your bank account in an instant through Western Union app. You're at their mercy. So there are things that have not progressed, and then there are things that have progressed. So it's about which side of the fence you're on and what you're dealing with on any given day in India, where you could go from,
yeah,
oh, life's awesome to life's frustrating.
yeah,
So there are those days that you will have to deal with. It's a different thing. It's a different thing for the kids. They're used to a butcher shop where it's all clean, HACCP conditions, and then they come here, Dad, I'm not going to eat beef. And I'm like, why? Uh, they're telling the mother, he was cutting the meat on a tree. I said, what do you mean on a tree? He's like, yeah, a piece of wood. And I said, oh, you mean the tree stump? And they're like, yeah, because they've not seen all this in Australia. So these are, you know, the flip side of the coin, where they're getting all these experiences of what it's like. Um, they love autos, no seat belt. Autos can go in small gaps. In Australia, it was lane discipline, which I had to get used to. It was stressful in the beginning learning to
yep,
drive a car. So these are all life learning experiences that the kids are learning. And then they've seen so much of India, and they have such an appreciation for right from nature to culture. Like they've seen the Himalayas, they've been to the Himalayas. We've taken them during the summer holidays. They got to play in the snow. So they've had quite a bit in the last 8 months they've done, which they can go back and showboat with their friends and go like,
yeah,
"Oh, I've done this. What have you done?"
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, they're just as kids, the minds and the brains are being expanded, and I think it's good. Culturally, they're just learning so much
yeah,
because they are sponges. Now's the time. Languages, especially, they can pick up easily like 4 or 5 different languages, and that's just going to help them in the future.
yeah. Uh, that's how it is. But yeah, who knows what the future holds for them?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome, dude. I appreciate you taking the time
Thanks, mate.
to speak with
Love
me.
catching up with you
Love
too.
catching up. Yeah, Yeah, all the best to you, your family, your kids, and yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch. Maybe we'll do part two
Sure. God
sometime
knows
later.
where I'll be sitting for all you know, maybe on the International Space Station, thanks to my wife. You never know, maybe if India set it up, she'll be like, oh, I want a piece of that too. The Indian part of it on the space station. So who knows? Your guess is as good as mine.